that I think is going to illustrate a lot of these points. So this is Angela's story, and Angela is an international student from Argentina, which is where I'm from. And she came to Australia a few years ago, and straight away the first thing that she did was go on a Facebook group for international students from Latin America in Melbourne, and ask, where she could find work. And pretty quickly, she got offered a job as a cleaner in a construction site. So basically, after the builders go home for the day, they come in and they clean up the site, they clean the toilets, that kind of thing. She was pretty happy with the work, and she did about 1 week, 2 weeks worth of work with another workmate that had been there for a little while, and everything was going really well. And then about 2 weeks in, her workmate called in sick in the morning, and her boss called Angela and said, "Look, your workmate's sick. No big deal. Look, do what you can today. If you can't get everything done, no worries. But do as much as you can muster." And Angela hadn't really been trained on how to do the full site on her own. She didn't know how to mix the chemicals. She didn't know how to work a lot of the machines. So she tried to say that to her boss, but her boss just was a bit too busy and said, "Look, do the best that you can. Don't worry too much about it," and hung up. Okay, so she's in a tricky position. She doesn't know everything about the site. Specifically, she doesn't know how to mix the chemicals, which she needs to do in order to clean the toilets. What would you do in this situation? So, Maral, Nikita, what are you thinking in this point? What should Angela do? Any thoughts? Let me ask a more specific question. So, do you think that Angela should just go ahead and mix the chemicals that she needs to mix in order to do her job, or should she say no? I'm not going to do that. I'm not trained for it. And we have Simone as well. Welcome.
Yeah, I think
Sarah, what do you think?
that's Neajuk. That's Neajuk, I think, is the Simone name. I think it's a different email.
I see.
Yeah, so if you guys want to unmute and have any thoughts on this story. Can you hear us, Neajuk? I'm not sure if she's probably logged in yet.
Yeah. Okay, I can hear
great.
you.
Hi. Yeah. So did you hear the story that Gabriel's just discussed about Angela?
Not really, because I just joined now.
I put you on the spot. No problem. That's all right. Well, welcome.
Okay, I'll retell it. And Maral, you had your hand raised. Did you want to unmute and go ahead? Maral, did you raise your hand?
No. Are you hear me now?
Yep.
I don't know what happened.
Oh, okay. Yep, go ahead.
I hear your history. I'm not sure because I don't have any idea about job story.
Okay. So I'll retell the story quickly, and I'll just go ahead with it. So basically, Angela is an international student in Australia. She just started a new job, and she hasn't got the full training for how to do every job in the site. And then suddenly one day, her workmate, who was doing the more tricky jobs, calls in sick, and her boss asks her to step in for that worker, and do the more tricky jobs like mixing chemicals or using the machines and things like that. And and just hangs up the phone. Doesn't give her any pointers. Doesn't help her to figure out how to use the machines, the chemicals, or anything like that. And Angela's faced with a choice, right? Does she just try to do the work the best that she can, or does she say no? And in Australia, we have the right to say no to unsafe work, right? So even though Angela didn't know this, she could have refused to do any work that she felt was unsafe or that she was scared to do. And on top of that, you have the right to representation, which means that you have the right to talk to other people in your workplace, and particularly health and safety representatives, to help you understand your rights at work and to help you, raise any issues that you have with your workplace. But critically, Angela could have said, no, I don't feel safe, doing this work that I haven't been trained for. I'm just not going to do it. And she's protected from being kind of punished or sacked or anything like that for saying that she feels unsafe. And this right comes from many, many laws that we have in Australia, which protect us in the workplace. These are just some of them. And so you can see there's Occupational Health and Safety Act. That's the main one for being safe and healthy at work. But there's also Injury Rehabilitation and Compensation Act. So this is the law that protects us if we're injured. There's also the Equal Opportunity Act, which protects us against discrimination, and the Fair Work Act, which protects us in terms of conditions like pay and breaks and hours and things like that. Now, in Angela, who is covered? So every worker in Victoria is covered by these laws. So it doesn't matter if you're a casual, if you work cash in hand, if you're an international student, refugee, doesn't matter. If you work in Victoria, you are covered and protected by these laws. So in Angela's case, unfortunately, she didn't know this, right? So she was only a couple of weeks into this job, which was her first job in Australia. She didn't know her rights. She didn't get any training. She didn't come to a session like this one to learn about her rights. And she was too scared to say no to her boss's request, right? In Argentina, where I'm from, there's not many laws that protect you for saying no to your boss. And so she might have thought that if she said no, that she could have just been sacked, right? So what ended up happening is when she went to load up her bottles with the chemicals that she needed to clean the toilets, she tried her best to, grab these big bottles of chemicals and put them into the littler spray bottles, but she didn't have the proper training and she spilled some of it on her hand. Now, she washed it off at the time, didn't seem like a big deal. She did her work for the day, but by the time that she got home, she had a pretty big burn on her hand. And when she went to the doctor said, look, this is going to take a couple of weeks to heal. You shouldn't go to work. And that's a big deal, right? 2 weeks without work is a lot of money to not earn. It's also, going to cost her money to go to the doctor because she doesn't have access to Medicare. So it's a pretty bad situation. So does anyone know what Angela can do in this situation to try to help herself? What rights does she have in this situation? Just having a look to see if anyone put their hand up. Okay, so in this situation, Angela can get time off and compensation for being injured at work, right? So in Australia, if you are injured while at work or while doing your job, you have the right to apply for time off and for compensation, as well as to have your medical costs covered. This is done through something called work cover or workers' compensation. And there's quite a few rights that we have in it. So first of all workers are covered by the employer's insurance or work cover. So it doesn't matter if your employer has signed up for work cover or if they've paid their insurance premium, you're covered, right? As long as you're a worker in Victoria. Number two is it doesn't matter whose fault it was, right? So in this case, her employer could try to say, look, she shouldn't have mixed the chemicals. She wasn't trained for it. She should have done it a different way. Doesn't matter. If it's Angela's fault or if it's her employer's fault or if it's no one's fault, you're still covered by it. And as long as you're injured at work, you can still get paid time off to recover, as well as all of your medical costs paid and compensation for more permanent injuries. If she had lost a finger instead of gotten a burn, maybe she could have gotten a compensation for the permanent loss. So in Angela's case, thankfully, instead of just kind of ignoring the injury or doing the best that she could on her own, she did ask for help. She went back to the Facebook group where she got the job and asked if anyone knew what she could do in her situation. And she got put in touch with her union, which is the cleaners union. They helped her to make a work cover claim, and they helped her to get a health and safety representative to look at the issues that were in the workplace. So it's unfortunately she did get injured at work, but at the end of the day, it's a bit of a happy ending in that she was able to get compensation, and hopefully workers in that workplace in the future won't get themselves into that situation because they now have a health and safety rep that can help them with their rights at work. So does anyone, other than unions, does anyone else know other places where she could have gone for help? Moral, Nikita, Yakosh?
Can you call WorkSafe themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are quite a few organisations that you can call. Some are government run, some are community run. All of the ones on the screen right now are they're not for-profit organisations. They're not out to make money. They are either community run or worker run or government run. So WorkSafe is a government organisation that you can call directly to get help with an injury, or if you think that something at your work is unsafe. If you have general concerns about your workplace rights, like your pay or your breaks or your job description, how much you're being asked to work, things like that, you can go to the Fair Work Ombudsman. That's another government-run organisation. But then there's other community organisations that can help, like community legal centres, like West Justice, Springvale Monash Legal Centre, the Migrant Worker Centre, which is where we're from, where we help specifically migrant workers, but there's also the Young Workers Centre for people under 30, and many others as well. So the kind of last thing to know about your workplace rights is that you can get free and confidential help with your issues at work. You don't have to ever tell your boss that you're getting help or that you're a member of a union or that you've contacted WorkSafe. None of these organisations will ever tell your boss without your consent. They're not going to take action without you agreeing to it. And all of them should be free, or their services should be free. So any questions about Angela's story? Anything that she did that you have questions about, or anything like that? Okay, well, in that case, some last few things to leave this story on is what happens before you get a job, right? So some other things that Angela could have done even before getting herself into the situation where she didn't know her rights and she wasn't sure how to act was ask more questions of her employer before starting work. So here are some, key things that you can ask of your employer just to get a sense of how workplace health and safety is in this job. The first one is probably if they have a health and safety rep. If a health and safety representative is a workmate, an employee, just like you, who's been elected by their colleagues to represent them on health and safety, and they get training and they have certain powers to enforce health and safety in the workplace. So if there is a representative in the workplace, that's a pretty good sign that the workers are educated about their rights, that they stand up for each other, that they're not going to let hazards slip, So good questions to ask is there a health and safety rep? What are their names? Where and when do they work? How do you contact them if you have a question or have an issue? Another good thing to ask is if there's any training required before starting work. workplaces, probably all workplaces, should have at least a safety induction or a safety briefing before you start work. But there may be other trainings that you have to do. In some cases, you may need certification to do certain jobs. So, for example, if you're going to drive a forklift, you need to have a certification in order to do it legally and safely. And so, you should ask if the job that you're being asked to do requires a certification. And the last one is to ask if there's a process for reporting incidents. All workplaces should have a process for what to do if someone is injured, or if there's an incident, or even if there's a near miss, like someone nearly got injured. So asking if there's an incident log, where is it kept? What happens to the incidents that get reported? Is there a health and safety committee to discuss them? That kind of thing, to get a sense of how proactive the employer is about health and safety. So that's I think that's the basic overview of health and safety rights in Australia. So I'll just go back to the key takeaways. So the first one is you have the right to say no, and you have the right to representation if you are feel unsafe at work. If you are injured, you may have the right to take time off and compensation. And finally, you can get free and confidential help with any issues at work. So let me know if there are any questions at that point. Otherwise, I might hand it over to Florence to talk about the situation under COVID-19. Yeah, Kate, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you have an incident at work and you're injured and you go through the process of getting support, but you no longer work for that employer, whether it's your choice or theirs, what happens then? Are they still sometimes obliged to give compensation, or does it come through a different organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So if the injury happened while you were working for that employer, then yes, you would make the work cover application about that employer. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you take a fall while working for an employer, and doesn't seem like a big deal at the time. You continue work, you find a new job, and then during this new job, you find that you start developing some chronic pain. You go to the doctor and they find, yeah, actually, when you fell that time, you did a bit more damage than you realized. You have a slip disc or something, and this is something that's going to require medication and physio for a long time. Now, that's an injury that you got while working for your previous employer. So you make a work cover application, and even though you're not working for them anymore, you may still be eligible for compensation for the work that you were doing that time. Yeah. This is also the same for chronic illnesses. So this happens a lot when, say, people are exposed to dangerous chemicals and they develop problems later in life. Asbestos is a big one, but also silica. Most recently, people that work with manufactured stone bench tops for kitchens and things like that. You may not have any symptoms of an illness while you're working, but then a few decades later, you develop a cancer or you develop a respiratory problem. You can still apply for work cover for those illnesses for sure. Were there any other questions? Moral, Yakosh, Nikita? Okay, if not, I might hand over to Florence to talk about COVID-19.
I've still got the share content just on yourself, Gabriel. Is that going to work, or do you want me to move it to Florence?
That's right. So Florence will speak and I'll move the slides.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you, Gabriel, for that empowering information, and it was so glad to have all of you here. So at this time of crisis, it is equally important that you're also well aware about your safety at work, whether you are working from home or working at your regular workplace. For many people, working from home is not an option. Many workers in retail, hospitality, health and community services, and other industries may continue going into the workplace on a regular basis. And now more than ever, your employer has a duty to provide you a safe working environment. Right now, this means doing some extra work to control the risk of infection, such as ensuring physical distancing of at least 1.5 meters between people, including customers, contractors, and other workers. It means that your employer should make sure that the next person in front of you, at your back, or beside you should be 1.5 meters away from you. An example of this will be the temporary markings at your work area, indicating where you and the others should position yourselves while working at the shop floor. When you are working in the office, this can be done by making sure that your work desk or workstations have a safe distance, which are farther apart from each other. And the second control measure is about providing adequate hand washing facilities and encourage workers to wash their hands often and practice proper personal hygiene. This means that there should be already additional hand washing facilities or hand sanitizing station, especially at the entrance and exit points at your workplace. Your employer could also give additional rest breaks or toilet breaks so that it will give you time to wash your hands often. Now, when it comes to personal hygiene, if you're going to sneeze or cough, you have to cover your nose or your mouth with a bent elbow or a tissue. When you use a tissue, make sure that you have to throw it to the bin straight away and use a hand sanitizer to disinfect your hands. Or if there is no hand sanitizer available, you can still wash your hands with soap and water. And another way to prevent the infection is by cleaning and disinfecting the workplace regularly. This means that your employer should already have a scheduled regular cleaning and disinfecting in place, at least before the opening and closing of the business operations. However, the areas that have a lot of foot traffic should be cleaned and disinfected at least several times a day, as well as the highly touched surfaces such as doorknobs, handrails, elevator buttons, keyboards, and others. And the last but not the least is monitoring the health of employees and ensuring that workers do not come to work if they are unwell. An example of monitoring the health of employees is when your employer conducts temperature checks at the entrance of your workplace. Your employer should not let any employee come to work if they are sick, especially if they are experiencing at least 2 symptoms of the coronavirus. And your employer should also ask you to present a medical certificate before you can actually come back to work. So these are only some of the measures that your employer can do to ensure that you have a safe working environment. Your employer has also other responsibilities such as to review and update existing policies and procedures to include the control measures that I just mentioned a while ago. Another responsibility is, again, just like what Gabe said, this is really important, is to provide training for any changes in standard operating procedures due to COVID-19. For new employees, your employer must still provide job induction before starting your work. I am sure that you will all agree with me that because of COVID-19, there are changes on how we need to perform a specific task. And these changes should reflect in our standard operating procedures. It depends on how complicated the changes were, but if, for example, it will require mixing of disinfecting chemicals to add in your usual cleaning solution, or using a new equipment or tools to minimize direct contact to people, then your employer must provide proper training. For new employees, Your employer must not make any excuses not to conduct job induction before starting your job. Because at the workforce at the moment, because they need a lot of, let's say, staff or employers, sometimes they are neglecting to conduct job induction because they need the workers to start straight away, which is not really good for your safety. Your employer must also ensure that all changes should be communicated to all employees, customer, contractors, and other workers. This can be done by sending emails, video conferencing, posting in bulletin or communication boards. It can also be as simple as putting posters or signage to the work area about physical distancing, just to remind you about the distancing rules, and also putting a poster about proper hand washing at the hand washing facilities. Your employer should also review all these control measures in place in a timely manner. This is needed to determine if the existing control measures were effective in controlling the infection at your workplace, or if there is a need to put additional control measures. To wrap it all up, these are all what will be expected from your employer to keep you safe while working at your workplace. Now, your employer has also the same duty even if you are working from home. But before I proceed to your safety when you are working from home, is there any question? I think I am doing it too fast, or if you need any clarification about that, then kindly unmute yourself and speak up. Is there any question? Okay, I think sorry. Yes, Kate.
I've got another question again. Hopefully, maybe I'm asking questions other people are thinking of as well. If you're, if maybe you've started a new job during COVID, or maybe you're already with an employer, and you know you're in the workplace and you're just noticing they're not quite doing the right safety standards. Maybe there's no hand sanitizer available, or maybe you're kind of forced to be too close to people, not doing the social distancing, 1.5 meters, that kind of thing, and you're not comfortable maybe bringing it up with your boss. Perhaps you've just started. What would be a suggestion of where to get advice or assistance around that?
Because if you are already in a workplace, probably you should also know about who is your health and safety representative is, because they are the very first of contact that you need to raise issues in situations like this one. So is there any health and safety representative at your workplace, by the way?
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, and to add to that, I would say if you don't know if there's a health and safety rep, or if there isn't one, then any of the organisations that I had before, so WorkSafe or the Young Workers Centre or the Migrant Workers Centre, will help to answer any questions that you have. And if you have particular concerns that you have about safety in the workplace, they can either help you to address it yourself, or they can, in the case of WorkSafe, even send an inspector out to see whether the workplace is safe, or if extra measures need to be taken to make it up to par.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gabriel, for the additional information. Yeah, and also, like, if there's no health and safety representative, if you also have a union representative, then you can also contact them about this one, and they're going to help you elect a health and safety representative if your workplace doesn't have one. So I hope that that answers your question, Kate. And if you're all right, we're going to move on to the next topic, which is working from home. So in Victoria, anyone who can work from home, they should. Employers should not force people to go into work if they are able to fulfill their job or their role from home. And employers who force their employee to do this can be fined. When making a decision to work from home or not, a blanket approach for a whole workplace or even team within a workforce is not enough. The individual circumstances of each worker has to be taken into account. This means that your employer should consider things like your workstation setup at home. Questions will be, is there enough equipment that you can use? Next is the suitability of work activities for working from home. Can you do these activities at home? Chances are, if most of your tasks can be done at your work office, then there is a greater possibility that you can also do it at home. Then there is also your workflows and expectations. So this is especially true if you are working in a project with your team. Another thing to consider is whether you are in a vulnerable person category for contacting the virus. In some cases, this could mean temporarily changing some of your duties if they cannot be performed from home, setting up new processes to accommodate the changes, or going into your workplace to perform just those duties. So again, I would like to emphasize that your employer is still responsible for the health and safety of your work environment while working from home. This means that they should identify, assess, and control hazards that are present at your home. Each person's circumstances will be different, but some common hazards to watch out for includes equipment, environment, fatigue, and isolation. So let's start with the first one, which is equipment. Employers should ensure that you have safe and adequate or enough equipment to do your work at home. These include things like a good desk and chair setup, monitors and monitor stands, a laptop raiser, or anything else that you need to perform your work. If you don't already have a good office setup at home, your employer should let you borrow necessary equipment from your usual workplace. Or you can your employer can actually negotiate an agreed budget for you to purchase an equipment, and then your employer should reimburse that amount to you later on. Your home-based workstation setup should follow the principles of ergonomics to avoid bad posture while working. So actually many people, and maybe sometimes including me, we tend to neglect about the proper posture while we are working. But as early as now, we should be really focusing also our safety regarding on ergonomics, because later on this can give us, for example, a sore back or musculoskeletal disorder or injuries. So if you really want a good computer setup at home, you can actually go to the WorkSafe website, and they have information about office and how you're going to set up your workstation. Now, how about your home environment? So noise, lighting levels, and ventilation are very important to a safe workplace. And your employer should take steps to control these hazards when you are working from home. Your work area should also be clear of any tripping hazards, such as electrical cords or just cables lying around your floor spaces. Your environment also includes the people around you. So your employer should consider any partners, children, housemates, and pets, and their impact on your work. Imagine yourself that your partner is working full-time, and then you can work from home, but you have two young kids who are also doing remote learning. Well, I experienced this myself. Will you able to do your task productively? So maybe yes, but honestly, for you to do that, you may end up working very late at night, or you will be up until the morning, which is not really good. And this will lead you to the next hazard, which is called fatigue. So fatigue is feeling overtired because of lack of rest. And to prevent that from happening, the first thing that you should do is You should log in and log off on time. I know this one, I'm also guilty sometimes that being at home to do your work, sometimes you are tempted to do more and forget about the time. But you have to think about your health first. And I'm sure that you will also be more productive if you are well rested. You should also take regular breaks and do some stretching exercises as you would normally do in your workplace. So if your work requires sitting for a long time, it is advisable to change your position every 30 minutes. Or, just look away from your screen for 5 minutes. That will also help you not to get any eye strain. So there is also another feeling that you need to watch out for, and that is isolation. Feeling disconnected from the workplace and workmates is a real hazard to your mental health and well-being. So your employer should put in place new communication plans to make sure all all workers are feel connected, including creating opportunities for social contact and welfare checks. So your employer should schedule team meetings using Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or even WebEx or other forms of digital communication. Also, your employer needs to check about your welfare like, hey, how are you coping working from home? Is there any challenges that you may have encountered? Or anything in general about your health and well-being. And as an employee, we also need to be truthful to our situation so that our employer will exactly know how to help us. Or they may even refer you to access employment assistance program if your workplace has one. So these are all the things to think about our health and safety while working from home. But sometimes, even though how careful we are, accidents do happen. And the big question is, what happens if you get injured while working from home? So while working from home, your workplace is your home. So it actually means that if you are injured, the workers' compensation scheme still applies to you as it would in your regular workplace. When it comes to workers' compensation claims, just like what Gabriel said, it doesn't matter whose fault it was that you got injured. Even if you are just enjoying your coffee and then you trip over your own feet in a wide open space, as long as you got injured at work, then you may be eligible for workers' compensation. As usual, if you are injured at work or if you have a near miss, accidents, then you should notify your employer straight away and make an incident report as soon as possible. And if just in case it is applicable that you need to make a workers' compensation claim, then you have to lodge it within 30 days. So yeah, now I believe that I have already covered the things that you need to know and to do so that you will stay safe at work, whether you are working from home or at regular workplace. So before we go to the next topic, I will give you the chance to ask any questions that you may have from me or Gabe. So is there anyone who would like to ask any questions? Kindly raise your hands and unmute yourself to speak. I think there is no one, so
Very, very thorough, Florence. No questions. So I think if there are no questions, or maybe just to give people a chance to think of a question, some takeaways I think for me when you're looking for work or when you're in a new job, I think that the first thing to think about is that we have really good laws in Australia, but they're only as good as the people who are enforcing them, right? So what happens very often in Australia is people who have every right to speak up, or every right to get compensation, or every right to raise an issue, don't, because they're scared that something's going to happen to them, because that may be what happened in the country that they came from, or that may be what happened to friends of theirs or family of theirs. And so even though they know that something's not right, they don't speak up, and then they get injured, right? And so, yeah, knowing your rights and standing up for your rights is just as important as the laws that protect us. The other thing to think about as well is when we are doing a job, generally health and safety may not be front of mind for everyone. I think when we do our job, generally we think of making an income, as well as trying to do the best that we can, and performing well. And so sometimes our own health and our own safety can go on the back burner. It can become a lesser priority. And so generally the way that I try to think about it is, how would I feel if someone that I cared about was put in this situation? Would I tell them to just do their job and not worry about it, or would I tell them to speak up? Right? Sometimes we end up caring more about our children, or our partner, or our mother, father, and so I think if my wife was in the situation that I'm in right now, would I tell her, oh, look, don't worry about it, don't worry about the safety, just do your job? Or would I tell her to speak up? And if you would tell someone else to speak up, maybe you should speak up yourself for your own situation, right? Not just because of yourself, but also the people that we work with, right? If you don't raise an issue about something that you think is dangerous, maybe you don't get injured, but maybe the person next to you does, right? And then it could have been prevented for saying something. And the last thing to leave on is, like I think we've stressed a fair bit already, is to always get help, right? So there are so many places that you can go to if you have a concern about your workplace. The Fair Work Ombudsman and WorkSafe are the government ones that will give you free and confidential advice, and they have hotlines, and you can use translation and interpreting services to access them. But then other community organizations like community legal centers, or the Migrant Workers Center, many others that can either help you directly or refer you to an organization that will be able to give you assistance. So I think that's pretty much it from us. So let us know if you have any questions or any comments. If you yourself have been in a situation where you had an OHS concern, or someone that did, we'd love to hear it, just to get a sense of the experience that you've been through. And yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And how would people get in touch with you guys? If they have any questions or just feedback, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure thing. Let me put our website in the chat so that you can access it, and then I'll share my screen one more time, just to show you how this works. So if you go to our website, which is migrantworkers.org.au, you can click on the Get Help button. And here you can make an appointment with us in your preferred language. We don't have all languages, but the staff members that we have speak these languages. So say, for example, you wanted to make an appointment with someone who spoke Spanish, you can click on the Spanish button, and you can make an appointment when it suits you. You'll have the organizer's calendar available here. So let's say you want to meet with us on Monday, 10:30. You give us your details. Sorry about that. That was the last person who made an appointment. You tell us a little bit about your situation. you answer these questions, and then we'll give you a ring at the time that you said in the language that you said, and with us, at least, we are very, very happy to talk to people about any issue that you have. And if we can't help you ourselves, then we'll give you a referral to an organization that we work with that can. So migration concerns is a big one. People make appointments with us to talk about their visa. We can't give visa advice, but we work with migration agents who do bono work or very cheap work, or to community organizations. We'll put you in touch with them, make sure that that you can get the help that you need.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Gabriel.
Yeah, of course.
So if you guys got any other questions, you can always follow up if you think of something in the future. Maybe it's sort of information to be used in the future going into a new workplace. If you've thought of any questions, let us know.
I think we lost you there at the
Yeah, I lost everyone there for a second. Yeah, but thank you so much, guys. That was really informative for myself as well as everyone, I'm sure. So thanks for your time. And we'll be sharing the presentation with the people who couldn't make it today as well. So that's great. Thank you.
No, happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
No worries. Thanks so much for attending, and definitely a very informative presentation by you and Florence. Like, definitely, even though, I've been working for such a long time, there's still information that I think, oh, yes, I didn't know that. So definitely, guys, if you've got any questions, maybe perhaps later, don't hesitate to get in touch. And once again, thanks, Gabriel and Florence.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks,